Welcome to Reuters Events Pharma 2026. With me today is Ed Hamilton, who's head of Omnichannel Experience Design at Syneos. Ed, thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure.
It's great to have you here. Now, I was talking about AI. How is AI changing the way HCPs access and use medical information?
So what we've seen from some of our recent research has been that over the last 12 months, there's been a huge increase in the number of physicians that are turning to AI, sometimes as their first port of call. So it's kind of quietly snuck up on us as this emerging source of information for HCPs. We're now seeing that something like, I think 96% of certain medical specialisms are using it on a weekly basis for clinical and for professional purposes, which is a huge transformation from last year, where it was only around 68%. So with that, what that means is that AI is almost acting as a kind of a layer in between the clinical evidence, in between pharmaceutical companies and the information they're putting out around their products, and obviously that clinical situation and scenario.
So let's just talk about what the implications are for pharma here. And we'll start with the whole area of digital and online communications. What are the implications for pharma here?
So I think the first thing here is that we need to think about not just writing content for humans, but writing content for the machine and making sure that that content is fully machine exploitable. By that, what I mean is we need to make sure that the content can be crawled, can be accessed by both search engines, but also LLMs, so they can actually find the information. The second thing is how we structure that information needs to be different. It needs to be structured for citation. It needs to be structured around questions and around the kinds of things that clinicians are looking for and that they're prompting these LLMs to respond to. And then the third part is that we also need to make sure that it's actually addressing real pain points, real things that customers want and need to know, not promotional messaging.
So looking at the implications for pharma in terms of congresses and medical education, where would you say AI fits in there?
Well, so it's quite interesting because Congress is hugely important and remains so, but Congress attendance is flat. Clinicians only have a limited amount of time and they have to wedge this learning in around their day-to-day. So where we see AI really coming into the fore there is we're seeing clinicians predominantly use AI for summarization. And when we look at kind of what they're using it to do, they're using it to summarize guidelines, they're using it to summarize abstracts, and they're using it to summarize clinical papers, which essentially translates it into the kind of so what for them in their clinical practice. So what does that mean around Congress? Well, I think in the first instance, as an industry, we need to think about how do we make our content more accessible to clinicians and to help them essentially mine that information and to create the synthesis. But the second thing is it means what value can we add above and beyond just information sharing? And so it's that discourse, discussion, and perspectives in translating that into, so what does that mean for day-to-day clinical practice? That's, I think, where as an industry we need to focus because, again, AI is going to be able to provide those summaries far more easily than we are ourselves.
And finally, in-person communications, though, person to person, where does AI fit into that?
So I think that's a really interesting one. I guess when it comes to sort of the role of the rep, we're thinking about evolution, not replacement. Clinicians still see a hugely important role for reps in terms of the dialogue, the relationship, and also the kind of the information that they get from field teams. But that said, because AI can now do so much, it's really raised the bar for all other interactions. So what we really need to think about is, well, what can our field team bring that clinicians are not able to get themselves and ask directly of LLMs? So that might be around, for example, bringing forward clinical cases, discussing difficult situations or scenarios that a clinician might find themselves in. And I think thirdly as well, experience sharing, because field teams have exposure to a much wider set of clinicians perhaps than an HCP does themselves. So they can share those best practices, advice, and perhaps how things are done in other areas, other hospitals or other centres.
A particularly interesting area as well, when we talk about in-person interactions, is between HCPs and patients. How does AI fit there, and what can pharma do to develop that?
So that's really interesting. So I mean, something that OpenAI shared recently was they have around 800 million active users. And I think about 25% of those users search roughly weekly for, to kind of have at least one health-related query. So that's a huge number of users that are using LLMs already for day-to-day health information. So the genie's already out of the bottle. And really what we need to think about is how can we best support patients that are using these tools? So that's making sure that, for example, within our given therapy area or around a particular treatment, the information that is surfaced by LLMs, it's accurate, that it accurately reflects the science, but it also reflects, obviously, the therapy and how it's how it's administered. So information accuracy is critical. I think the second opportunity is for us to think about actually how we can use AI to support clinicians in their interactions with patients. So that might mean about helping them better translate the complex medical science into something that's patient-friendly. So I think as organizations, we can use these tools to help provide HCPs with better resources and better information that they can then share with patients.
Fantastic. Now, AI is moving so fast. Everybody is seeing it change almost in front of us. How can pharmas stay relevant and to keep up with this astonishing rate of change in this whole new field?
So 3 thoughts on that. First one, I think, is that it's really important that we act now. This is not an emerging behavior. This is something that has already emerged. Essentially, it's an executional gap that we need to tackle. So that's the first thing, is to take this seriously and to start acting on it now. Second point is really about making sure that our content is fully machine exploitable, and that it's really it's structured in a way that's going to ensure that our content and our products and our medical education is visible through LLMs. And then the third part really is about working not just with our own touchpoints. So, for example, putting content out on a pharma-owned website, but actually thinking about how we can help constructively shape the wider information ecosystem. So that means partnerships with third parties. That means working with professional societies and ensuring that, where we have, for example, new science to communicate or perhaps new clinical evidence, that we're not just putting it on our own portals and websites, but we're working with the wider sources of influence to ensure that it's out, it's available, and ultimately that it's then sort of cited and referenced by these tools.
Ed Hamilton at Syneos, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today. It's been great.
Thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate it.